Welcome to Solar Alberta's 2023 Solar Series. Today's webinar is called Solar, the Good Neighbor. My name is Preet Kang and I'm the president of Solar Alberta. I would like to take a minute to acknowledge that I am hosting to you today from Amiskawachee, Waskahegan, also known as Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, which is located on Treaty 6 territory and the homelands of the Métis Nation. Treaty 6 territory is the traditional gathering place and home of many Indigenous peoples, including the Papaches, Nahiawak, Saulteaux, Dene, Blackfoot, and Nakota Sioux, nations whose ancestors have cared for and nurtured these lands since time immemorial. We were delighted to have so many people register for this event. Please note that we will be recording this webinar for future distribution. Today, we will be hearing from two informative speakers. Our Executive Director, Heather MacKenzie, will begin by providing an overview of the topic, including the various ways to create a solar-friendly neighborhood. Next, Paul Gill will highlight the new Renfrew Solar Carport. Following the presentations, there will be a Q&A period in which all of you can participate. The entire session will wrap up in an hour and a half. In an effort to increase accessibility to the content we are offering, we have enabled closed captioning for this presentation. You can turn the captioning on in the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. During our Q&A period, we will be using Zoom Q&A for questions rather than the chat box. So please enter your questions in the Q&A section. Also, please click on the little thumbs up symbol to upvote questions that you like. Before we move forward, we're going to do a quick poll to get a sense of who we have joining us today. Please take a minute to answer the question popping up on your screen right now. Are you a solar industry professional, a solar industry student, or solar curious? We'd like to know. And while we are doing the poll, I encourage you to take a minute and pop your name, land acknowledgement, and any contact information you are comfortable sharing in the chat now and throughout the event so that others can look you up on your LinkedIn or email you. A great way to form new relationships. Okay, so it looks like the poll results are in. 11 are solar industry professionals, 0 are solar industry students, and 89 are solar curious. Very interesting. Thank you for participating, and it's always very helpful to know a little bit about the audience before we dive in. And now for a little bit about Solar Alberta. Solar Alberta is now in its 32nd year of operation. We are a not-for-profit society that is dedicated to accelerating Alberta's transition to a just and sustainable energy future. We do so by advocating, educating, and serving as an industry and community hub for solar energy. Our membership is made up of over 900 individuals and businesses. To keep up to date on all of our activities, please sign up for our newsletter at solaralberta.ca. We provide a number of services, including managing a solar directory and requests for quote systems through our website. In this way, we act as a bridge for installers, suppliers, and other solar-related businesses to connect with their customers and clients. You can see a screenshot of the directory here on the slide and link to it in the chat. So in addition to our website services, we run a number of educational programs, such as this solar seminar series, and a number of in-person and online networking events each year. Our next solar seminar series will be held on August 17th at noon Mountain Time, and we will explore how Indigenous peoples are at the forefront of the energy transition. DeAndre Smiles will begin by providing an overview of Indigenous leadership in renewable energy products. Then Andreas Fulela will provide a tangible example and dive into programs and projects the Métis Nation of Alberta are using to accelerate solar adoption. We also host an annual online conference and trade show called the Solar Show. Please save January 29th to February 2nd, 2024 for our next Solar Show. Recordings of the previous years, including 2021, 2022, and 2023 solar show sessions can be found on our Solar Alberta YouTube channel. In addition to the public education we provide, we also host a number of live online courses at very affordable rates for solar industry professionals or those transitioning into the sector. Classes will be starting up again this fall on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, and once again, there is a 10% discount code for members. Registration for fall courses is now open, but if you are keen to start learning before, you can alternatively purchase pre-recorded courses and workshops on our website. If you are not already, I encourage you to join Solar Alberta as a member. We are constantly evolving member service offerings, some of which include discounts on our courses and workshops, access to members-only content, and more. Individual membership is $35 and can be purchased at the link in the chat. If you are looking to support the work that we are doing at Solar Alberta, please consider volunteering or donating. The link to be a general volunteer is being popped in the chat now, as well as links to our crowdfunding page, where any donations made to Solar Alberta will be matched by the Government of Alberta. Now, without further ado, I would like to take this opportunity to give a shout out to EPCOR for sponsoring this year's seminar series as a whole. We couldn't offer all of this amazing free content without the support of our sponsors. We are always interested in developing more partnerships for our events. If you or your company want to work with us to educate the public about solar or solar-related technologies, please don't hesitate to reach out. Now, I'd like to welcome and introduce our speakers for the day. Our first speaker will be Heather MacKenzie. Heather is the Executive Director of Solar Alberta, where she and her entire team are working hard to accelerate Alberta's transition to a just and sustainable energy future. She's a seasoned leader, community organizer, and green business advocate. Prior to becoming the Executive Director of Solar Alberta, she worked as a government relations professional, ran her own business, and served as an elected trustee on the Edmonton Public School Board. She is in the midst of completing a master's in public administration, has a master's in international development, and has undergraduate degrees in both sociology and history. She believes that investing in solar is a very concrete way that everyday Albertans can take meaningful action on climate change. Our second speaker today is Paul Gill. Paul has worked in the Calgary technology sector his whole professional career. Paul has championed the Renfrew Solar Garden initiative and seen it becoming an enabling force for solar generation in Calgary communities. This project has been a symbol of his passion for a positive and sustainable future, using renewable generation to electrify all his gadgets. Welcome to both of you, and now I will turn the mic over to Heather to begin presentations.
Thank you, Preet. I'm just gonna pop my screen up here. All right, hopefully that's coming through well. You can camera off now and I'll take it from here. Thank you very much. So hello everyone, and appreciate the introduction, Preet. As you heard, my name is Heather MacKenzie and I am the Executive Director at Solar Alberta. I am pleased to be presenting to you today alongside Paul. I'd like to take a minute as well to acknowledge that I too am presenting to you today from Amiskwaciwaskahagan, which is located on Treaty 6 territory and the homelands of the Métis Nation. In my presentation today, I'm going to be focusing on 4 different aspects of solar as a good neighbor. First, I'll talk about the general benefits of having solar nearby. Then I'll take a look at how solar can be strategically located directly on your property. Next, I'll talk about how to build solar-friendly communities. And then I will discuss how solar project developers can help maintain solar's reputation as a good neighbor. So what makes solar such a great neighbor? There are quite a few things. Unlike other energy sources, solar is silent to operate. Solar panels do not have noisy moving parts. There might be noise for a week or so when the panels are being installed, but afterwards, solar panels are as quiet as a wheat field. So further to this point, solar panels are low maintenance and they operate independently. Therefore, there won't be any heavy traffic in and out of the area to work on the system. Just the occasional checkup. Essentially, solar panels are that neighbor that you don't really interact with. You just kind of smile and wave at them. So these are some of the reasons why many remote and off-grid communities are making the switch from diesel generators to solar panels to supply their electricity. We actually had a few folks take the stage during previous seminars, such as this, to discuss that idea, including a recent representative from Fort Chipewyan and a recent presentation about the Nipika Mountain Resort. Recordings of those sessions can be found on our YouTube channel. In fact, a recent article from Business Intelligence for BC has stated that of the 27 microgrids on Indigenous communities in BC, many have already started making the transition to solar from diesel generators. So definitely some interest in the nice, quiet, calming aspect of solar. Another benefit of having solar nearby is that solar panels are clean, odor-free as an electricity source. Although there are emissions generated in the manufacturing of solar, solar does not emit any greenhouse gases or harmful and smelly pollutants while in operation like other energy sources do. Okay, so as such, neighbors of solar arrays can breathe easily after installation. There are huge air quality benefits from transitioning to solar that will not only improve the quality of life for neighbors on a day-to-day basis, but will also have long-term health benefits for those especially suffering from respiratory issues. On a similar note, solar panels do not release chemicals into the water either, as some other energy sources do. All right, a third benefit of having solar next door is that unlike those neighbors who jump ship as soon as the going gets tough, solar energy sticks around. Solar won't leave you high and dry, and it won't leave a bunch of junk for you to clean up down the road. As solar arrays rely on a renewable energy source, they are with your community for the long haul. Solar panels are actually warranted for 25 years and can last upwards of 40 years. Even at the end of their productive lifespan, the modules, you can be reassured that the solar site itself will still be capable of generating solar energy. And so new panels will more than likely be swapped in for old. Therefore, you need not worry about a growing footprint on the earth from having to find perpetually new solar sites to replace the old, as we do with some other non-renewable energy sources. This is one of the reasons why solar panels are being placed on orphaned oil well sites around the province. You can learn more about solar energy on abandoned and productive oil well sites in our seminar, Renewable Energy Meets Oil and Gas, which is on our YouTube channel. When it comes to the 3 R's that some of us might have been taught in school, reduce, reuse, and recycle, it is easy to see how solar contributes to the first R by reducing our dependence on non-renewable resources. But did you know that the Good Neighbor Solar is also a great energy source to fulfill our other green household goals of reusing and recycling? It's true. So even when panels become less productive as they age, there is a growing secondary market that facilitates the reuse of solar panels. And at the end of life, there will be limited material waste generated by your good solar neighbor, as ARMA, the Alberta Recycling Management Authority, is ahead of the game in piloting reuse and recycling programs for solar panels in Canada. So did you know that actually about 95% of a solar panel can be recycled? They're made up of common things like glass, plastic, metals, and other materials that are recyclable. And they're actually being integrated into our standard electronic recycling systems too. So you can learn more about solar panel recycling and reuse from recordings of our solar show and solar series sessions, also on our YouTube channel. One final big benefit of having solar in your neighborhood is the job creation potential that comes with solar. So the solar sector is one of the fastest growing industries in Alberta. And with that come jobs, and more jobs. As solar energy becomes more popular, even more solar related jobs will become available. The Pembina Institute has estimated that the Alberta solar sector will create 4,500 jobs by the end of this year alone. And our 170 business members at Solar Alberta are constantly sharing job postings through our weekly Solar Jobs Roundup. So watch for that on our social media channels. If solar is in your community, the chances that you and your neighbors will benefit from both the direct and indirect jobs that this new energy sector creates are significantly increased. And now for a picture of my home. I wanted to mention that in addition to the many benefits that I've just listed of having solar as a neighbor, I'm going to review some of the benefits of co-locating with solar, or in other words, essentially having solar as your roommate or roofmate, however you want to phrase it. Did you know that over 12,700 homes and businesses in Alberta have adopted solar already? These solar arrays may not pay a customary form of rent on your home, but the vast majority of those folks who are putting a solar roofmate or roommate up top, they're using their array to significantly reduce their utility bills. So this is a photo of my roommate, my solar roommate, and don't tell my family, but these friends are the cleanest, quietest, and most reliable folks I've ever lived with. So my only complaint is that they aren't very good at conversation. Alrighty. So as we learn more about, as we're going to learn more about in the upcoming presentation from Paul, in addition to being installed very cost effectively on rooftops over town, solar can also move on into existing parking lots and other previously developed lands. So solar carports or solar on parking lots, it's a great option for protecting vehicles from the elements like hail and snow. This is particularly helpful as extreme weather becomes more common across our world. Because of its protective capacity, a number of Albertan car dealerships and other parking lots are opting to adopt solar. Furthermore, solar carports can reduce parking lot maintenance costs by channeling snow and rain to specific spots rather than having it fall across the entire parking lot. Because solar coexists so well with pre-existing buildings and developed lands like this, solar arrays do not need to encroach on green fields, wetlands, or other relatively undeveloped land. Solar is not only a good roommate or roofmate for inanimate objects, it also gets along nicely with critters and other more animate objects than car parks. On farms, solar is becoming increasingly popular, and for good reason. There are essentially two broad categories of solar on farms. There are solar exclusive farms that are typically on brownfield or areas that do not have great land for farming. And then there are agrivoltaic systems. The term agrivoltaic is used to describe the practice of combining solar with food production. Solar can be integrated on all sorts of farms, including those producing honey, wine, herbs, as well as those with livestock. In fact, just like with the cars, on some farms, solar PV is being used to protect sheep, cows, and other animals from hail and other increasingly hostile weather patterns in Alberta. Not only can solar PV coexist with and protect livestock and crops, the land under and around solar arrays often maintains its moisture better and can be used to create pollinator gardens or grow perennial grasses. I was actually reading an interesting article the other day that explained that these grasses can then help stormwater filter slowly into the soil, which in turn can reduce runoff or erosion. Their roots, apparently, can also trap excess fertilizer from nearby farm fields before runoff enters streams and rivers. So there's something to be said for integrating solar into windrows around farms and on farms as well. Agrivoltaic, this blend of solar with food production, is highly recommended by all those who are worried about food security. Some municipalities are in fact requiring this integration of crop or livestock farming alongside solar and establishing solar siting guidelines or recommendations before allowing developments to take place on good farmland. The American Solar Grazing Society has a helpful map that showcases many different agrivoltaic sites across North America. It's interesting to note that there are different ownership structures for solar on farms, including some on which the land and the solar array are both owned by the same organization, and there are others on which the land is leased from an owner other than the solar installation company. All right, we have reviewed the many reasons why you might want solar as a neighbor or as a room or roommate, but there are a number of factors holding some of our communities back from wide adoption of solar, including poor community design. Because of this, a number of municipalities are developing solar-friendly neighborhoods to promote solar development. This is a photo of the Drake Landing solar community in Okotoks, where an initiative of this type has taken shape. When shifting to solar-oriented community design principles, here are some key factors to take into consideration. Firstly, communities should ensure that their street orientation and design is friendly to solar. So grid street patterns are typically superior to curvy linear or cul-de-sac street design for ensuring good solar access for all. Secondly, it's really important to be conscious of shading considerations, and strategic location of trees and high buildings is important. That's not to say you can't have high density areas with solar arrays. Without thoughtful design, with thoughtful design, both solar and density can and really must be accommodated for truly sustainable development to take shape. And of course, electric vehicle charging, as well as adequate distribution and transmission infrastructure, are key to enabling distributed electricity generation. Solar-friendly communities are much more likely than other communities to see wide adoption of things like EVs, heat pumps, or other electrical appliances. So therefore, 200 amp service for all new single-family homes should be the norm, and that's what we're encouraging the province of Alberta to adopt. Additionally, the Municipal Climate Change Action Centre, you may have heard them referred to as MCCAC, they're a partner of ours. They have a solar-friendly municipalities guideline that recommends not including the added value of solar in the property tax assessment. So that's customarily around 4%, which is what is the added value of solar to a property. And of course, if you want to be a solar-friendly municipality, then don't charge people extra taxes based on that amount. It can really impede solar, especially at the commercial or business scale. This all said, the quickest and fastest, the most cost-effective method for municipalities to become solar-friendly would be for them to adopt solar-ready guidelines for new homes. That would include, first, just requiring south, east, west, or flat primary roof orientation. So in essence, not allowing or encouraging roof orientation that primarily faces north is logical in Alberta. Unfortunately, I'm still seeing far too many new homes going around, infill going around, where the main portion of the roof is facing north in my hometown. And I keep thinking, that's kind of ridiculous in this day and age, but that's going ahead. Secondly, requiring that roofs be free of complex and unnecessary roof shapes like gables, or as some of my members like to call them, spurious peaks. So often you'll see a developer putting a nice flat solar ready roof in, and then they'll just like throw an extra unnecessary peak on top that actually serves no purpose, does absolutely nothing except ruins your solar potential or makes your solar look really ugly. So, discouraging that or requiring that those be left off unless they're necessary from an architectural perspective, that can help. Also, requiring that roofs of both homes and garages can handle the structural load required to support solar. That's typically 3 pounds per square foot. Very common that new homes will have that, but not many new garages, which really limits your solar production potential. So definitely making sure that our new garages also can accommodate 3 pounds per square foot would help folks adopt more solar in our neighborhoods. So the cities of Edmonton and Calgary should also utilize the regulatory permissions that their city charters allow for to adopt higher tiers of the provincial building code, which is currently tier 1 of the National Energy Code for buildings. That would help a lot in accelerating solar-friendly neighborhoods. All right, my last slide of my presentation. Of course, relationships always go 2 ways. So we've talked a lot about, the neighborhoods and how they could be more solar friendly. But now I'm going to just touch a little bit on how solar can be more neighborhood friendly and make sure that we maintain solar's reputation as a good neighbor. This will increase the chances that communities will want to increasingly adopt solar-friendly policies. So to do that, Solar Alberta has developed 2 sets of solar siting recommendations. They are available on our website. One version is intended for solar project developers, such as Paul and the folks you're going to hear from next. The other version is intended for municipal and county planners or elected councillors who are making land use decisions. These recommendations are intended to encourage folks to be thoughtful about where they site solar installations. Solar Alberta is encouraging project developers to put arrays and create arrays in a way that minimize their ecological footprint, generate community benefits, and optimize solar production. So Solar Alberta is not the first organization to have developed solar siting recommendations, although we suspect we might be the first in Alberta. But please note that we have undertaken research and referenced a number of other guidelines or recommendations in the drafting of our own Made in Alberta document. So in essence, these tools are intended to maintain solar's reputation as a great neighbor, which is why we're all here today. So, all right, so with that, I'm going to turn the mic and screen over to you, Paul, and I'm really looking forward to the question and answer period that will follow. If you want to turn your camera now on, Paul, and your mic, I will turn mine off.
Okay, sounds good. All right, share my screen. Start presentation. All right, so I am Paul Gill, and I was the champion of the Renfrew Solar Carport. It started a couple of years ago, right before COVID, where we wanted some community generation. But a bit of a catalyst of it was the release of the small generation regulation that came out in Alberta, where you can have kind of sell into the power pool with a small generator. So this whole thing is really about community solar and what the common person can do to get solar on their roof. And a lot of the time we see that people can't get solar on the roof for various reasons. So there's this model called community solar. It's starting to become a lot more popular in the United States. And it's basically just a system that enables any sort of like ownership, leasing, or even just access to a solar array somewhere in your area. Typically, the way that this works is it's a distributed energy resource. So if you ever hear that acronym DER, that means basically just a power generation facility that is connected to the distribution network. So there's the distribution network that goes around your neighborhood, and then there's a transmission network that is very high voltage and goes out to the countryside to various power plants all over the province, kind of thing. So solar is very friendly for distributed energy resource because you can basically put it anywhere. Which is why, over the past couple of decades, Alberta has implemented things like the micro generation regulation, and then like what I mentioned earlier, the small scale generation regulation. The micro gen regulation is something that you see on your roof. So when you install solar on your roof and it's grid tied, I don't think there's a single instance in Calgary of having like an off-grid solar system, but it is technically possible. People have it at their cabins and whatnot. But in Calgary and most of the installations that go up, they are connected to the grid, which means they can pump power out to the grid. So right now it's a sunny day. I have solar on my roof. I'm not using that solar. My laptop's running, my refrigerator's running. That's about it. The rest of that power is going out to the grid, in which case we have this tool called microgeneration. So it's just a regulation that the province has set up so that any power that I generate, I'll get paid for. So it actually shows up as a credit on my bill. And that power, that's typically up to about 150 kilowatts. For reference, I have a large system and it's on my roof. It's 10 kilowatts. But you can get it for businesses 150. You can even go up to 5 megawatts, but it's a little bit more complicated once you start getting that big. And the whole idea with microgeneration is that I can only produce what I consume in the year. So if I consume a lot of electricity, I can actually have a pretty big solar installation. But if I don't consume a lot of electricity, I can't get a large solar installation. So it's all about you can only make up to what you consume. So it's supposed to be a net zero kind of formula kind of thing. And small scale is just a little bit of a tool that the province is giving to enable small scale generation to pop up all over the place without having to go all the rigmarole and all the extra regulations and extra paperwork that's required for a proper, very large generator. So back to the community solar. What are the benefits? I kind of mentioned this before. The big one is investment. You can invest on something down the street. A lot of the time with energy, it's kind of like you pre-buy that energy. So you invest in your future of consuming energy, but it can go a little bit further because a lot of the time these assets, these solar installations, they can live a lot longer than what the numbers say. They're warranted up to 25, 30 years, which is a long time. And a lot of time they'll just keep producing. They'll just be, not as efficient as some of the new panels on the market and stuff like that. But it's an investment. And a lot of the time that investment is impossible because of people like, they don't have the ability on their roof. Let's say you live in a condo. Let's say you have a huge tree that's beautiful that you don't want to remove it right by your house. Let's say you rent. You can't just up and install a solar array on your roof. So community solar is where that kind of comes in. And it's also a little bit more cost effective. You get kind of like the economies of scale with community solar, and it's just so much easier because you can basically come in and say, I want a piece of that. I'll get into it a little bit further about how it works later. But there's lots of other little benefits to the community from it. It's an indirect benefit, but by doing more distributed energy resources, so power generation on the distribution network around your house, it will lower the cost of your transmission costs. This has been a really contentious thing over the last couple of years about everyone's bill getting bigger. And it's because there's two parts to your bill: how much energy you use and how much it costs to get that energy to your house, called delivery charges and energy charges. And the more transmission we need, the more big, huge power lines to get it from power plants that are way out in the middle of nowhere to your house means more transmission costs. So if we do more distributed energy resources, we won't need as large of transmission lines. We don't need more transmission lines, and that will lower your bill. That means your delivery charges on your bill will decrease, which is a huge benefit. And DERs, distributed energy resources, are going to be very popular moving forward. You're able to buy tangible energy. So with community solar, you can actually really buy renewable energy. Sometimes it gets a little bit complicated with energy, right? Because you buy energy, but it's just a pipe. It's just connected to your house, and it could be generated from some from a gas plant or a coal plant, because it's just electrons that are flowing to your house. And it's really hard to keep track of it. The industry is getting better at this, almost to the point where we may even have like digital tracking of electricity. We'll know where every kilowatt came from. But that's in the future. But that is going to be happening. But with having solar, it's more tangible. It's more like you just know that it's from the sun. It's more easy. Love local, just being more local, being more local with your infrastructure, getting local installers, local companies, local energy. A lot of people talk about energy independence because the sun is shining on that spot, and that's where the energy is being done. It's not done on the other side of the globe and being shipped across the ocean to use. It's the ultimate in energy independence. A lot of renewables, wind and solar, are energy independence, assuming you have kind of like the supply chain for it to enable that independence. It's really simple. Solar is just simple. Community solar is extra simple because a regular installation, you get it on your roof. You have to arrange the install. You have to look at quotes. You have to get them to install it. You monitor it. Most of the time it doesn't break. It's just set it and forget it. Most people that have solar think it's boring because you just put it on your roof and it just magically generates energy for many, many decades. But with community solar, it's just a piece of paper saying that you own or you use a little piece of a larger installation somewhere else around your area. Dual use for the carport, the Telus Carport, that is a dual use, which is brilliant, because a lot of time solar is just simple. On my roof, it's dual use. I live here, and there's also generation on the roof. With a carport, you park under it, and we didn't have to use any extra land to put up that solar. We just kind of put it above the stuff that we were already doing before, and obviously it creates local jobs. So the thing that started the program, the project for the Renfrew Solar Garden or the Renfrew Solar Carport was, just community members. It was myself and a couple other volunteers for the community association that said, we could do this. We could do a community solar installation where you have just a large array and other people, use it, or they invest in it, kind of thing. It's just kind of a simple little activity. Again, solar is very linear. It's very simple. What we produced from is a 1.4 megawatt solar carport. So for reference, that 1.4 is way smaller than a lot of these big utility installations, like the Travers solar installation down by Tabor is like 400 megawatts, but that is a massive, massive solar installation. And then so it kind of sits in the middle. These kind of like these installations like this, they're around a megawatt typically, and that's kind of big. It'll power like 200 houses kind of thing throughout the year. Or it will provide energy to 200 houses, but it's still kind of small. But it's good because you can wreck them anyway. So why Spark? That was a big question about why we, put it up at Spark. One of the requirements was a boundary. It was inside the Renfrew boundary. We wanted to have it as kind of like a thing that it promotes Renfrew. That we have a carport, or we have a solar installation, a community solar in our neighborhood, because that's what we want to scale out. That's kind of the broader vision of doing this, is that Sunnyside gets a community solar installation, and Hillhurst gets one, and Mainland Heights gets one. So we needed to be in that boundary, and Telus Spark is actually technically in the boundary of Renfrew. It's so, and it's also kind of like in the heart of the city. It's right in the center of Calgary, basically. And a lot of people see it when they're driving by. A lot of people see it when they go to it to take their kids to the science center. So it's a great educational resource as well. Just knowing that just those big panels sitting above you are just generating energy. That's all they do, because of amazing technologies generated from science that have enabled that. And they were also like a really receptive partner. They were really excited about this. It aligns with a lot of their stuff. They also have a couple other solar installations on the property. They have one that's a tracking one. And they have a couple that was an earlier demonstration that was set up several years back, kind of thing. So to say that basically, I think it's basically all of their energy over the year is going to be generated by solar. So that's a great thing for the Science Center to have. And why a carport? I've kind of highlighted this a little bit, but shared use. Protects cars from snow and from sun. Carports tend to be a little bit more popular in southern climates where you don't want a super hot car. So you park under that, and that is primo parking spot. But a big thing actually is right by the source of the demand. Whenever you're doing generation, in a perfect world, you would generate the electricity right where you use the electricity. So that takes out that whole need for all that complicated transmission, distribution. So in a perfect world, everyone would have their magical little power generation facility in their basement, and they didn't even have a connection. They wouldn't have those delivery charges on their bill as well. But the only real downfall at this point for carports is the cost. It was expensive because there's a lot of extra racking. You're drilling into pavement. It's got a long span. It's one of the more expensive forms of solar. But that will change, and I can tell you it may go down. It may not go down a crazy amount, but it will go down because there will be economies of scale from initiatives like France making it law that half of the parking spots in the country need to be covered in solar in a carport. It is a big deal, and legislation like this is going to be enabling the drastic drop of cost of solar carports, because they're just gonna be pumping them out like crazy. The racking that you see behind me is at Telus Spark, but it will probably get simpler and cheaper as time goes by, because there will be a global presence of carports, and that will just bring the cost down. So it'll be a normal thing to see carports all over the place. One stat I've also heard is that you cover 1 in 3 parking spots in the United States, and you power the entire United States. So there's a lot of parking all over the place. Cover it, generate energy from those parking spots. So talking a little bit more about our journey that we had for doing this carport. We had the feasibility, which is where the community was heavily involved. We engaged everybody. We said, what would you think of this? And we would go here. Then the Valley of Death hit when COVID hit, and then it was reborn when the city actually got some money for it, the stimulus money from when COVID hit, and the city got $152 million bucks. We just kind of snuck in there because we were kind of a small price point. So we just kind of got some scraps, and we were able to build this. So the city actually owns it. It wasn't the original vision of it, but it still has an opportunity for community solar, so that people will be able to come in and invest or buy that clean energy. So like I mentioned, we had community engagement, we had design feasibility. That's what we did in that first leg. And that was a grant that was paid for by the MCCAC, the Municipal Climate Change Action Center. The Valley of Death was, we didn't get an original grant, because we had originally applied for a grant because of the cost of solar carport. It doesn't make perfect financial sense to get a proper return, because those returns that you get for solar are going to be like 10 years to 15 years, where you kind of want that payout. That's kind of common, but a lot of time we're actually starting to see that creep down and down and down, where you're basically even after like 7 to 10 years, which is great, because then you're in the black. You're actually making money off of your solar rather than you having to do payments on it as well. So But we applied for that grant. We didn't win it. Actually, the slide that you saw earlier with Keith and Renew Well, they're the ones that won that grant that we applied for, and they're doing great stuff as well. I'm really excited about what Renew Well is doing. That will actually play into this kind of community solar. I'm really hoping in the future as well. So it rose from the Arshes. Arshid, that's not a spelling mistake. That's Arshil Herji. He's an awesome guy. We used to work at the city, and he really helped this project get off the ground. And the reason it got off the ground, the reason we got some money to build it was because it was shovel ready. It was basically ready from all the work that the community did. We basically were sitting there saying, we have a design, we have engagement with the community, we have an off taker, we have a place to put it. We were ready to roll. And then we got it, and so you can see the installation anytime. One decision we decided to go with was bifacial, so that it will actually generate energy from the sun shining at the top, as well as sun reflecting off of the floor, off of the parking lot, off of snow. So that's actually going to be a big thing, is that this array will produce a lot of energy even in the wintertime, because the sun will hit snow on the ground and bounce up and make energy. So the asset is done now. It took a long time because of COVID and because of supply chain issues. We were kind of held up for like electrical panels and just trivial little things, but the supply chain was totally messed up. But it is rolling now, because a lot of people have seen this installed for like a year or two. But now it is rolling. It is producing energy, and that energy is most likely going into Spark. Whenever you produce energy, it's just going to go into the closest load, the consumer, and it will be Spark typically. And the way that usually works, when you have generation and you have an asset like this, you want to set up a power purchase agreement, or a PPA, that says Telus will buy the energy that comes out of that solar installation. And that's being set up right now with the city. So the way that this is going to look forward to the future, back to the future, is that the big enabler of this would be the Alberta Solar Co-op. So there's a couple co-ops in Alberta, but this is one that was started up several years ago. It was tough to get them off the ground because it's looking for these kind of things. There needs to be these little enablers, and the small scale generation regulation was one of them as enablers. Just put up 1 meg here and 1 meg there and all that. So these are things that will be really good for community investment. So they'll have a project. So this, it was originally envisioned that the Renfrew Solar Carport would be the first project of the Alberta Solar Co-op, but there's lots of delays happening right now with the city, getting that power purchase agreement set up and getting the agreement set up with us that we'll be able to do a pay it forward system. So what you see on the screen right now is a pay it forward system, where we will have worked with the city that will be basically providing us with a solar installation that is paid forward year over year to different communities in the city. The city has an obligation to help out the communities throughout the city. And this is one way of doing it, is that they could enable an asset like ours to produce energy sales, which is going to be in the order of about $120,000 to $150,000 a year in energy sales. And that money will go into basically a pot that will be provided to the next project. And so the vision is that year over year, we'll be able to provide that money to a new community in Calgary. So they'll be able to set up their own community installation. And so it's all about Calgary. So the Alberta Solar Co-op will be for Alberta, and they may have other independent projects. They may get one of Renew Well's projects for like somewhere out by Tabor, or they may get another one off of some rooftop solar or something like that. And they may engage their members that you basically sign up with the Alberta Solar Co-op and say, okay, I'd like a little bit of solar, like 10 kilowatts, and wherever it may be. Either way, you kind of get you'd have a mechanism to invest in that. And that's where community solar gets a little bit complicated, because there's different ways of doing it. And I kind of highlighted this a little bit earlier. I just wanted to explain this before I wrap up, because it's pretty important. And they're playing around with it a lot in the United States, but we just haven't really got into it a hell of a lot yet. So there's 3 real forms of doing community solar. There is equity, where you own a piece of that. So let's say there's a 1 megawatt, and you sign contractual agreements with a co-op to say, I own 10 kilowatts of that 1 megawatt. And it just, whatever it produces for energy sales, you'll get into your bank account, or a cut check for you kind of thing. That's kind of like your investment. It works just like a regular investment, where you get dividends, and your dividends is money that basically offsets your own kind of thing. So if you look at this as a net, you are net zero if you buy enough solar for your own energy usage kind of thing. There's debt, which is basically you buy bonds. So you're basically helping out the company, or you're helping out the solar co-op, so that you lend them money and then they pay you back the money. So it's kind of a little less related to the operation side that you get in like an equity play. but you get dividends year over year, or you get, the maturity, a typical bond, you hold on to it for X amount of years, and then it matures and you get that plus whatever interest was raised. So that's just an investment mechanism. And the last one, which is starting to be the most common in the United States, where there isn't like an investment, where there isn't a large sum of cash, like, $5, $10, $15,000 it's paid. That's basically almost like a prepay of your energy. You're just buying clean energy. In that situation, you have a third party that's an investor in it. And so they're getting their return on investment by buying that asset, by building that asset. And then you just get community members that just commit. You say, I'm gonna sign a 3-year contract for buying energy from that solar installation down the street. And then there depends on the states, depends on how this is implemented. Again, this is not super common in Canada yet, but in the States, it's kind of like a credit on their utility bill. And then there's another bill that you get. So it's a little bit weird with the payments, but the important part at the end of the day is that it's all about that net play, that you are offsetting your energy by signing a couple pieces of paper, and money flows in a couple directions. So just to recap the whole project, lessons learned. Community generation is obviously all about people. You're putting a lot of people together. You're trying to pull out their values, which is a clean environment, clean energy efficiency. Just a good way of doing things. And there's a lot of people very passionate about this kind of stuff. Solar is ubiquitous, so it's just solar is simple. Solar is actually very simple. I've said this several times, is that you just throw it up and it's a very linear relationship. But carports aren't quite there yet. They're going to be there. I'm really confident that they're going to be there. But we're on that path, and I'm really excited for once it will be a standard practice. Paying it forward is a great simple. So it's a good mechanism for what the city has kind of agreed, verbally agreed. We need to work out all the paperwork on this kind of stuff, but it's a pay it forward system for the communities. So just engaging the whole community on solar and getting everyone to be able to invest. It's a good model. So if you want to scan this screen, there's a QR code right there that is a case study. It's a case study of our whole experience. It was written a couple of years ago. Talks about the whole step that we went through for getting this erected. If you're looking for a community installation in your area, I'd recommend to take a look at this case study and then reach out to the Alberta Solar Co-op to see how we could possibly enable a project, and to see how you'd engage your community to raise funds to fund that project. And you can't go without mentioning a lot of the partners. We've had a lot of great partners through this. We've had MCCAC, we've had Telus Spark, Calgary, Alberta Efficiency Alberta. They were the original kind of ones that engaged with the grant. Solar Alberta, Solus, Tapestry, Pembina. So all great partners, and everyone for this project was a very squeaky clean project. It always went through any sort of like readings like super fast, because it's just a very clean, very good project to be associated with, and a lot of people got really excited about it. So that's my conclusion. Thank you very much for your time. If anybody wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, that QR code is right there if they want to scan it, and that will take you directly to my LinkedIn page, and we can connect.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Preet, if you want a camera on and join us for the Q&A here. Happy to have you pitch the questions at Paul and me.
Of course.
Paul, you can keep your camera on too for this section. We'll just have the three of us on screen, I think.
I'm unable to start my video as the host stopped it. Would it probably get back?
Yeah, I think MacKenzie will fix that shortly here.
No problem. And while that's happening, there is one question in the Q&A chat, or the Q&A. Are there EV chargers in solar carports?
Yeah, so there are quite a few. I guess the ones that are the most plentiful are in our backyards. So for example, I have an electric vehicle, I have it in my carport, and I have solar on my roof. So I am essentially charging my electric vehicle with solar. So that's the miniature version and of this question. And of course, it's super important because in Alberta, our grid is still primarily powered by natural gas. So if you really want a truly green electric vehicle, you do need to consider where your electricity is coming from. There are a lot of other options to consider though. Some people can actually pay to charge their electric vehicle with renewables through organizations like Bullfrog or Radical or other companies that will basically make sure that the power you're drawing for your electric vehicle at home is coming from renewable sources. But I think you're talking more about these big carports, and I've seen a couple around. It's certainly growing in popularity. One that's not completely adjoined, but that I've seen, and you may have seen it on Highway 2, is the Equus station. So Equus has an EV charger. I think it's free if I'm not mistaken. I've used it quite a few times, and right next to it is a nice solar array. So you can't park under the solar array, but they're obviously trying to encourage folks to consider coupling these notions. And then I know Tesla was talking about certainly rolling out solar and making sure their chargers were solar powered. I don't know how far along they are in that. Sometimes companies make promises and it takes a while to fulfill. But yeah, certainly seeing more and more of our members getting involved with solar over carports that are associated with EV chargers. And I was just in the US and saw some of the same kind of developments taking shape there. Paul, do you have anything to add to that question posed by Preet and our attendee?
Yeah, you can put a solar, or you can put a car charger anywhere as long as you have an electrical connection, kind of thing. So for the Renfrew Solar Carport, I don't think there is anything right now. I know that the city was talking about putting in a couple, but it's just pulling energy. And if it's in the middle of the night, you're not actually going to get the energy from the solar carport. You're going to get it from the grid. But the whole thing is a 1.4 megawatt. So if it's a sunny day, and if there was there could be upwards of 20 cars charging that would just come, like the electrons from the solar down into the vehicles, for 1.4 megawatt at about 7 kilowatts each. Actually, no, that's wrong math. Anyway, you could charge a lot. You don't, the two are entirely independent. But a lot of the time you kind of do it just as a kind of a symbol of progress. And
yeah,
so
it's kind of a logical next step. And I think for a lot of folks, we're seeing that those questions being asked more and more, because lots of our members who were solar experts first are teaching themselves or learning how to install electric vehicle chargers as well. So definitely seeing a natural coupling that's occurring there with the EV charging and the solar. Interestingly enough, it's actually in Alberta, the microgeneration regulation that Paul was mentioning earlier, it actually creates an incentive to buy your electric vehicle before you get your solar, because if you do, then you're actually allowed to size your solar array on your home or business to actually offset and essentially charge your car. And so that is pretty awesome. Not everyone can afford an electric vehicle yet. So some people like me end up getting solar and then scaling up their solar later when they get an electric vehicle. But if you can afford an electric vehicle at the outset, you can actually incorporate that energy use right into the size of your solar array. So that's pretty awesome here. Okay, Preet, any other questions for us?
Yeah, of course. There's one from Cynthia. If the microgen maximum was upped, would that be useful to the community? Would it be easier for more people to get into microgen?
Yeah, so that's actually something we're advocating for at Solar Alberta. We're actually just fine-tuning our advocacy around that, but essentially we're hoping that residential folks will be able to kind of max out their roof. We'd like to see the microgen regulation changed, because right now you do get a lot of people who are kind of filling a third or 2/3 of their roof instead of maxing out their solar potential. And that is also an issue for commercial arrays. My understanding in talking with distribution folks is that it's easier to accommodate that type of generation at the residential scale. Whereas if you were to apply that to a commercial project, it would be more challenging to accommodate that quantity of solar energy at a commercial scale. So as Paul was discussing, residential arrays usually are talking 10 kilowatts, maybe on a very large roof, you might go up to 20 or something. It's not going to get overly large for the distribution and transmission system to accommodate all that energy coming onto the system. But if a large institution that was talking about 2 or 3 megawatts decided to max out their generating potential, what would happen is the area around that institution none of those other homes would be allowed to have solar because they would have already maxed out the local system's ability to take all that energy on. So there's definitely some considerations when you get to the very large scale folks where it might not be possible, but we are absolutely advocating for an end to the cap on microgeneration for all the little guys, and hoping that the government of Alberta will join us in making that change to the microgeneration regulation. We do have an advocate with us section on our website. I'm in the midst of updating our provincial advocacy letter to make sure that what we're requesting is extremely doable and supported by everybody. And so watch for that letter and then join us in advocating for those changes. Paul, do you have some thoughts to add on that important question?
Yeah, I definitely do. I've worked at a distribution utility around Alberta, and so I know the microgen regulation pretty well, and I know the meaning behind the microgen regulation. And to put it kind of bluntly, they don't want you being an independent generation operator. They don't. It's not a mechanism to allow you to make money. It is a mechanism to offset your usage, kind of thing. So that's why when you do an application, so Heather was kind of mentioning this a little bit before, there's an application saying, I want solar on my roof. And they say, okay, let me look around the area, see if there's space, because if there's too much solar, you can't install solar because it'll overload transformers, because transformers work in both directions, right? It may be able to do 37 this way, but also needs to do 37 that way. So if you have like 60 coming back because there's so much solar, it will break the transformer. So the application is for that. And the application is also for checking your energy usage. So if you say, I use about 8 megawatt hours of energy in the year, I cannot go and install a solar system that will give me 16, because that's double the amount. And because of that, I've actually run into people that have went and retrofitted their house to make it incredibly efficient. And so their electricity usage went way down. And then they got solar. And then they applied for solar and they said, you can only install this much solar. And you know what my advice to him was? You should have done that the other way around. I know it's bad advice, but I'm trying to give that advice to people now. If you're starting, get solar first, and like be an energy glutton, and then get the solar, and then make the efficiencies, because then you play the game. You know, I didn't make the generation regulations, but if you were to do it, that's the way you want it. So when you fill out your application, it's before any sort of upgrade, so that way you can actually capitalize on this a little bit, but the system is designed to not let you generate revenue.
It does create a bit of a perverse incentive, because there is that incentive to get solar before you do energy efficiency upgrades. So usually what I say is electrify everything first. So electrify, as much as you can. If you electrify your your electric vehicle, your appliances in your home, then you can, as Paul was saying, you can get a larger system. So yeah, that's the incentive that's in place right now in Alberta. And it will be a hard sell to see that changed. We did hear back from the government. They're going to review the microgen regulation in the coming years. We're going to make our pitch to them to try and let the little guy make a little bit of profit. Because, all the big players can profit off solar. So part of me wants all the, all the single moms at home to be able to have a little side hustle off solar. So definitely pushing for that. But in the meantime, I think Paul's advice, we have to heed that very well. Yes, you can get a heat pump first. The challenge with that is, unless your home is efficient enough to be operated with a heat pump alone, you won't be able to incorporate the heat pump's usage into your solar size, because if natural gas is still running, they will assume that your home is not efficient enough for that. So we actually have a blog on that. I see folks talking heat pumps. We have a blog all about how the various distribution companies, EPCOR, NMAX, ATCO, Fortis, how they factor in heat pumps. It's a little bit different than electric vehicles. So just so you're aware, you can check that out or follow our newsletter for more information on that. All right, Preet, before I digress too far, you better take us away in another direction.
Let's answer the next question related to distribution savings. Could you explain more about how does generating on a home rooftop benefit neighbors in the case of a power disruption or brownout? do they benefit by accessing the power that you are sending back to the grid before it reaches the transmission station? Is that the correct way of?
The short answer is no. So the way most homes are set up in Alberta is as soon as there's a power outage, actually your home is affected as well, even if you have solar. And the reason for that is to protect the electricians, because if they're in your neighborhood working on getting you back online and you're still running, you're going to hurt them. And so the protections are in place so that you're shut down with your neighbors, unless unless you go through the process of becoming sort of an island. And there are protocols for that. And I do have a friend or two who have islanding capability. And I'm sure Paul could touch on this a bit, but just so you know, we are hoping to run a seminar, I think in November, on the concept of islanding, because we're getting a lot of questions about that. And I think it's because of Prince Edward Island's storm last year. We've had a lot of questions, people saying, you know, if we do have a climate disaster, can I be essentially the block parent for my neighborhood as a solar generator? And I kind of love that idea. It's really not as necessary in Alberta. We have incredible grid reliability. You would be hard pressed to find a full week power outage here like they had in PEI. But it is kind of interesting that folks can get the mechanism set up at their home if they have some battery storage on site or an electric vehicle, and then they have the proper installation done to make sure that all the electricians in the neighborhood are protected. You could theoretically become a little island if necessary. But like Paul said, most folks just want to stay grid connected. It's far better for them. And I always say it's better to say you want to become someone with islanding capability instead of just a little island when you're in an urban center. Paul, do you want to touch on that at all or add to what I mentioned?
Yeah, talking about microgrids, and microgrids are kind of like the buzzword right now in distribution, because you just isolate and you can work as normal kind of thing. This is the way the world's going to go. There's going to be grid 2.0, where energy is flowing in all directions all at the same time kind of thing, where you have this little group here and this little group here. There's distributed energy resources all over the place. And what Heather's talking about is called an automatic transfer switch. So those kind of things are built into like a Tesla Powerwall, where the moment that it senses that that your source electricity is down from the grid, it will just toggle over, go click, and then it'll actually just take power from the battery, and it will invert it, and it'll provide power to your house kind of thing. But that's just on the house side. If you want like a whole block, that would be the block would need to be set up as a microgrid, and in that microgrid there needs to be some sort of generation. Usually it's a battery, but it could be other things. There's lots of utilities all over North America that have been working on microgrids. And they're just it's a lot of work, and it can provide better resiliency, but the only thing that I really see scaling up is kind of like that household microgrid, where you have an automatic transfer switch in your house, and your stationary battery or your vehicle will provide power to your house.
Yeah, and we had a microgrid presentation last month, and the interesting thing that she mentioned is that it's particularly important for people with health needs that require electricity at home. So during a crisis, if you're someone who's got to be hooked up, you've got your dialysis unit running at home, you've got your oxygen unit running at home or whatever, those folks might consider that path a lot sooner than your typical Albertan. So it was interesting to hear about some of the people who might be interested in having that sort of either islanding capability or on their whole block having that capability. Very interesting. Definitely a climate. I was thinking, Paul, we need a whole session on solar as it relates to climate adaptation, because what we're thinking a lot about now is solar in terms of power generation and sort of getting away from emitting greenhouse gases. But now we're getting more and more questions about, okay, so here we are in this climate emergency, we're in the midst of it, and solar also has a role to play in terms of supporting vulnerable folks. So it's really interesting to have that second conversation. Thanks for adding on that and giving all the technical lingo. As folks who have attended our sessions before know, I'm really good at speaking to the everyday Albertan, but I don't know all the technical lingo, so I sure appreciate you plugging that all in there. Preet, next question if you want.
Yeah, of course. Next question is, how would you address cleaning of dust or snow accumulated on panels on roofs?
So our members say don't. If it's a residential array, just leave it alone. Rain will come, it'll fall. the snow will melt off quickly. In fact, panels are such that they heat up before your typical roof would, so snow will come off much quicker than your typical roof. If you remember the photo of my home from the presentation, you can see all my neighbors have snow on their roofs and I don't, because I have a solar array and it melted off faster. And so we actually have a research study that was done at NATE on our website. And what it'll show you is that winter solar production in Edmonton, really the snow and whatnot is only reducing your production by 3 to 5% annually. And a good solar installer, many of whom are on our website, they'll size your array to compensate for that. So for example, they'll make your array big enough so that it covers your full year of production, even if you're in, of consumption, even if you're in a northern climate. So for example, if you're in Edmonton and you're gonna have a little more snow and a little more darkness than Calgary, they're actually going to size your array a little bit bigger. So there is a bit of a cost associated with that, but most installers will tell you if you get up there with a broom, try and sweep that stuff off, try and wash it off, you are almost certainly going to damage your array and it will cost you more than you're earning. Now that's a little different on a large array. And so if you're looking at a commercial array, there are products and there are experts who will coach you. If you have someone who's designated to maintenance and actually knows what they're doing, they can actually coach you on how to manage that issue. So most solar installers can coach commercial folks on how to manage snow and dirt and all that jazz. But on a rooftop, they always say, just don't go up there. It's also not worth it in case you fall off your roof. So definitely you'll get different guidance depending on the size of your array, whether it's even accessible or not. And then of course on your local climate and what the issues are there. But typically the advice is leave it alone, it'll be fine. Anything you want to add there, Paul? Are you doing any maintenance at the solar carport?
No,
just leave it and love it and let it go. Yeah, just got to relax. It does drive folks crazy during a few weeks of the year, but just remember when snow comes, like when it's sitting there in January, those are the darkest days. So you're not really generating too much on those days anyways. And the snow will be gone by the time the light comes back. So that's when you'll see in Alberta, the generation curve, it's really high in the summer and everyone knows it's going to be a bit lower in December and January, and that's okay. The solar installers will size you accordingly.
Thanks for that answer. Let's go to the last question as in the Q&A. Going back to the first question about solar for carports. This one asked, would EV charging help the financial case for solar carport?
Oh, at a residential level, absolutely. You know, I feel like there's a pretty big incentive to have solar if you have an EV, because you're basically charging, I'm not going to say for free at home, but it's pretty good charging rate. I'm not sure whether there would be a financial case to have an EV charger under a solar carport. Do you think you could make extra money doing that too, Paul, for your co-op?
Maybe, because you're basically avoiding the delivery charges, right? Because if you did not have that carport and you had EV chargers all smattered together and you're charging the users, say $1 a minute, you're pulling that from the grid and you're charging those cars. So you are paying the delivery charges. Whereas if you had a solar carport, you just pull from the solar and it would go directly to the vehicle, so you have no delivery charges. So your bottom line would be better if you were operating those EV chargers and making money off of those EV chargers. So yes, and it's very relatable to the residential, right? Like you avoid delivery charges, and that's what local distribution, that's what DERs give you, is that you don't have to deliver it, you just consume it on site.
Yeah, I mean, it also probably depends a lot on how you're financing your solar, if you're getting a good deal or not, because, you know, often when it comes to solar, there's upfront costs and then you have a lot of savings down the road, right? And so depending on your financing mechanisms, the cost balance will change. I think if I understand the question correctly, though, The idea is more, if you're going ahead with a solar carport like you have done, and you're trying to make it generate as much money as possible for your co-op, would it make sense to couple it with electric vehicle chargers? Like, so they're the add-on to kind of help make more money for the co-op. I think that's how I understand the question.
Yep, and it would.
Mm-hmm.
If you were work out on a spreadsheet, you would be saving money.
Yeah, because you've got basically two businesses going instead of one. It all really, again, will probably depend on how much you can invest at the outset, right? Whether you can afford to foot the bill for those two setups at the same time, hey? Yeah, awesome. Well, we've plowed through those questions. I did see one question in the chat about condos. Do you mind if I touch on that, Preet?
Please go ahead.
Okay, so when it comes to condos, I think there are some condo residents here, and I was a condo resident myself. There are a lot of factors to consider. We are working on a presentation specific for condominiums because they are so unique. I would suggest, first of all, there are significant differences between whether you're in an apartment condominium or in a townhouse condominium. So in a townhouse condominium, adopting solar could be as simple as getting your condo board to say, all of our members are allowed to put solar on their own roofs. It might be very simple. If you have individual metering, you might just need that in the bylaws or something. And maybe some provisions around what's going to happen, who's going to foot the bill if you have to remove the solar for a roof repair down the road and pop it back up. So from a townhouse position, it shouldn't be too complicated. The main issue there is getting everyone on side, which is part of why we created this presentation today. Because if you're trying to make the pitch to your condo board about why they might want to let you have solar, it might help you if you can tell them all the reasons that solar is a really good neighbor and they might want to let you have solar. If you're in an apartment building, usually those are not individually metered. So what you're dealing with typically is a condo where individual unit owners aren't really going to be able to adopt solar. Or if they are individually metered, it's still complicated. So what's typically done and what our members have often done in apartment condos is they'll say, okay, they ask the condo board, how much do you communally, so how much do you use in power all year together for your hallways, for your lobby, lighting and heat, for your elevator? And then they'll take that amount and they'll offset that on your condominium roof. You probably won't be able to get into the individual units. Typically an apartment won't have enough room on the roof to offset everyone. That's not always the case though. Some builders do design with solar in mind. So I think Avalon Home Builders do make large apartment buildings that are net zero, I think, with solar on the roof. So there is a possibility, especially with a new build, to factor it in right away. But often you won't have enough roof space, which is actually where these solar co-ops are phenomenal. And we have an increasing number of members. And of course, Paul's co-op, you can look at these co-ops as an alternative for a lot of condo owners. If you either don't have the metering structure that would facilitate individual solar, or you don't have enough room on your roof for everyone to have individual solar, definitely look into investing in the solar co-ops. We have some investment opportunities on our website for solar, and what those will allow you to do is to participate in the solar sector on someone else's roof or someone else's carport. And essentially you'll be participating in what Paul was describing, which is making sure we're generating solar somewhere in Alberta. And you're seeing some financial benefits from that. It won't necessarily be on your utility bill, but it still has the same financial outcome or a similar one. And it's really all about leasing someone else's roof if you don't have a roof that's solar appropriate. So those are just a few thoughts for condos, but you can definitely give me a ring. And we do have a number of members on our directory who have supported condos through the process of adopting solar. Just they have to do it in a very unique, and it really depends on your ownership structure, your metering structure, and your design of your building. So talk to our our members, there's an RFP section on our website at solaralberta.ca, and they will touch base with you in your condo to see if it works for you. And if not, connect with our co-op members for sure, because they'll probably have investment opportunities for you to look at instead.
Amazing. Thank you for all those who asked questions and for everyone for joining us today. Before we end the session, we would love to get you to give us some feedback and rate our session via poll. And while that's being set up, a couple of last thank yous. Thank you again, Heather and Paul, for presenting, and MacKenzie for putting together the seminar technology. And lastly, thank you again for EPCOR for sponsoring our solar seminar series this year.